lot of people know about the Enola Gay, but I believe there were 2 other airplanes in your group flying that day.
There were 15 airplanes
Oh,
in our group, 15 crews, all trained to drop atomic weapons.
Right.
Now, some of them would have been good at it, some of them wouldn't have been good at it, and this sort of thing. But out of the 15 crews, we had about, I would guess, about 8 or 10 of them that I would have trusted with an atomic bomb any time by a extinguisher we did or anything at that time. Then there were another 5 or 6 who were just plain goofballs. But you have them in every troop and everything of that type. And
actually flying to Hiroshima, how many planes?
we had 7 airplanes in total up that day. We had 1 airplane sitting in Hiroshima as a standby. You see, this bomb had to be loaded out of a pit. You had to put it down in the pit and then raise it up. Same way you used to grease cars back in the olden days and this sort of thing. And we had a pit real building in Hiroshima. We had a standby airplane sitting there. We got landed there, taking the bomb out of our plane, put it in that test one airplane. Then we had 3 other planes out of it, one over Hiroshima, one over Kokura, and one over Nagasaki as weather planes. And they sent the weather back to us as we were flying up to the target. So we just went to stooge around, going to Hiroshima first, then Nagasaki, and then Kokura, and so on. So
depending on the weather conditions.
That's right. So, and the weather all 3 turned out to be good. So we picked Hiroshima as the first one to hit. And then we had 3 airplanes on the actual bombing mission itself. Our plane, which had the bomb, and Chuck Sweeney, which trailed us by 500 feet, yards, something of that type, half mile, depending on which book you read. And we broke right, he broke left, but he dropped instruments out of his plane. At the same time, the bomb dropped out of ours. These instruments were on parachutes. Japanese looked up, they saw a lot of parachutes falling and everything of that type. A lot of Japanese to this day will say, we dropped the bomb by parachute. They did not. What they saw by parachute were instruments. Then we had George Marquardt. He was trailed us about 25 miles, something like that. Had one of these fast X cameras up there. It was supposed to take pictures of the explosion. Didn't work. We didn't get any pictures.
And as your crew dropped the bomb and turned, tell us what you saw and felt in the airplane.
Well, we didn't see anything. That's number one. We're in B-29. No windows back there. But the scientists told us early on, they said you'll have to be at least 8 to 9 miles away from the bomb when it explodes, or it might blow up the airplane. Right. So basically, we were working to get at least 9 miles away when the bomb exploded. The way to do that was go in and drop the bomb. And in Europe, we just kept flying right on over. You know, the bomb would go like this, and they'd be down here, and we'd be up here, and you never hear people tell the difference. But we'd have done that with this, we'd be 500 feet here. This sort of thing. So 150-degree turn, run away from it as fast as we could.
And did you guys feel the shock wave in the airplane?
We put 2 good shock waves. They measured about 2.5 to 3 Gs each.
Right. What was that like in an airplane? Was it?
Well, you know, in a fighter it wouldn't have been anything. But in a B-29 at 30,000 feet, it was a hell of a shock.
Right.
And that sort of thing.
And because the bomb was so heavy, you guys had to strip down the airplane. So you guys.
Well, no. The main reason we stripped down the airplane. Yeah, we were very heavily overloaded when we took off. That's number one. But we didn't do it to strip down because of that. We stripped down to get speed and altitude to get away from the bomb.
But you guys were basically defenseless because you had to take all the guns out of the airplane, or was it?
Well, the Japanese had nothing there anyhow. There's a book put out by the Smithsonian right now that says Jake Beezer is quoted with Jake Beezer, the guy who was on the airplane to do the radar countermeasures, because the bomb operated on a radar proximity fuse, and if the Japs had gotten onto that frequency by mistake, it would have to be listed by mistake. Well, they could have exploded the bomb in the plane. We didn't think that was a good idea.
But they didn't send up any fighters or anything?
No. The Japanese were late before we ever dropped the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb did not win the war. 85% of the Japanese industrial capacity had been burned down before we ever dropped the atomic bomb. And the only thing that happened was that you had a militaristic regime there, and they just want to continue fighting the last big battle on the beaches.
Right. And the feeling was among the troops that if America had invaded, there would have been hundreds of thousands of losses.
I don't know how many there have been a hell of a lot.
Right. And when you guys got back, was the feeling was there a feeling that the war was over? Or
Yes. We talked about a plane coming back. This war's over.
Right.
But and they didn't capitulate because, and this is, you know, there's a lot of misconception about the bomb and everything at that time. The Japanese had a program the same as we had a program. Same as the Germans had a program. Same as the Russians had a program. Same as everybody had a program, and that sort of thing. And they're all based on U-235. We dropped the only U-235 bomb ever dropped. And because of that, the Japanese thought we don't have any more, which is the reason why they did not react to the first bomb.
So the second one's necessary.
And the second bomb then was a plutonium bomb. All subsequent bombs were plutonium bombs.
And in the Cold War, do you feel like with the bomb having been dropped and people could see the devastating effects, do you feel like that stopped the superpowers from ever launching?
Well, I think that's one of the major reasons why it was never launched or anything of that type. But by that time, the Russians had all the information coming out of our program too. Hal Agnew became the fourth director of the Los Alamos laboratory. And when Daisy Glasnost arrived, why he was sent over to Russia to meet his Russian counterparts in their atomic program. And when he was introduced to them, they said, "Dr. Agnew, we want to congratulate you, not only on making the first bomb, but the first two bombs, yours and ours." So much of the secrecy.
And one last question, because I know we have people waiting on you, but tell us about your mission in Europe and Africa, I mean, your missions in Europe and Africa with Eisenhower and some of the other missions that you flew over. What was the one that maybe stuck out in your mind?
Well, any time they shot at you, stuck out in your mind, for heaven's sakes, and everything of that type. But I think the major one was the first one we flew there in North Africa, where we refueled our B-17 out of 5-gallon cans. We carried our own bomb, and we hauled our own fuel and our own bombs from the dock to the airplane with a bomb truck trailer they gave us. Refueled our own B-17 out of 5-gallon cans, loaded our own bombs, and then flew the mission, using a standard oil roadmap to navigate by, and that sort of thing.
It's kind of fly by the seat of your pants.
And, well, you couldn't have, well, if you went too far north, you hit the Mediterranean, for heaven's sakes. And you could tell where we were all the time, because on the way home the Navy was always shooting at. Every time you passed a dial port or something at that time, you saw a lot of shells coming out, and that was the Navy shooting at you, so they knew where you were.
What was it like to know you were getting ready to welcome the world into the atomic age?
Well, first place, we didn't realize we were doing all that stuff and everything of that type. We knew there was a tremendous scientific expert in it, but our interface with the scientists was certainly limited. We didn't get around to all the labs and everything at that time. We didn't get down to Los Alamos occasionally and everything else, but they got our attention, really got our attention on the scientists did when they told us, you know, you have to be at least 8 miles away for the bomb is going to blow up the airplane and this sort of stuff, and that kind of got our attention and this sort of thing. But other than that, we didn't realize that we were doing an earth-shaking type of thing.
What was it like flying during the war back then? What was that like?
You didn't expect to live. It was that simple. You know, we flew a second mission out of England over North Africa, and back in those days, if you got 10 missions in, why, you were really lucky, because if you without being shot down and being either dead or good prisoner of war, and so Tom and I both just said, hey, we're not going to make this war. So from that on, it was easy. Well, not easy, but easier.
Were y'all shot up ever?
Yes.
But never shot down, just shot up?
Just not shot down, never shot down. Thanks to Paul Tibbets primarily. He was an outstanding pilot.
Talk about the group that was on the Enola gauge. What was that group?
Well, you have to remember that it was a special group primarily. We were not all on the same crew, because Tibbets was the commanding officer of the group, Thomas group, the bombardier. I was group navigator, and we substituted the others. And we had an outstanding flight engineer from Wyatt Dusenberry. But, you know, other than that, why the people just more or less got together, and it was really Bob Lewis's regular crew. So we had never flown, frankly, I think we'd only flown 1 or 2 times together as a group before that mission. and everything of that type. But, between Paul and Tom and I, we were very, very close because we had flown most of our missions over in England and Africa together. And then we all got selected for this group, of the atomic group. And he picked us for group navigator, group commodore, so we didn't even fly together almost all during the war. So we were very close to each other. And Tom Kirk is my best friend from the time. I met Tom in the nose of a B-17 in Sarasota, Florida in 1942. And we both called up the nose, he was the bombardier, and I was the navigator. And that's how we introduced ourselves, and that was the beginning of a friendship that lasted until he died.
Tell me about him as a man. What is he like?
He was one of the most straightforward men you've ever seen in your life. And he didn't care whether you were a colonel or a general or what you were or anything else. Tom always told it the way it was. And then after, of course, he dropped the atomic bomb, well, he had enough prestige and everything that they carried a little bit of weight. But he was a man's man, let's put it that way. He's the kind of guy you, when they sit down, you know, I can also think back to Tom Kirby, Kermit Behan, Jim Van Pelt and I, going out to dinner with them, or just having a meal with them, or just having a beer with them in the Auschwitz Club. It was always an experience. You never knew what you were going to argue about. But something, I'll tell you that right now.
Growing up reading about the Enola Gay, you know, it's so much in our head that this is just some fabulous plane, almost godlike plane, because it was so instrumental in the war. But what was it really like being on that plane? Was it a nice plane? Was it just...
Well, compared to the B-17, it was a nice airplane. No, the B-17, I had 58 missions in B-17s. Tom had 64. And after that airplane, every time you hit 10,000 feet, you had to put on your oxygen mask and wear your oxygen mask for all the rest of the mission. You could always tell a B-17 guy because you had to imprint an oxygen mask on his face and that type of thing. So compared to that airplane, well, the B-29 was a pleasure to fly in, but compared to, you know, the commercial jets we have today, well, it was still a sorry fit for an airplane, I'll say that. But it's noisy, number one. Hot as when you were over the Mariana Islands. Fortunately, almost every mission I flew over there, well, I only flew one mission over there, but we took off at night, so it wasn't real hot. But you go out there and crawl in those planes, after they're sitting out on that island in the sun. You took off all your clothes down to your shorts, and then as you went up in altitude, you put them back on. That's the only way you could survive.
What type of message do you want to give to people to remember just how important the war was to this country?
Well, the war essentially saved our way of life and everything else as compared to Hitler's or Stalin's or some other way of life and everything of that type. You know, it seemed that important back in those days, but in retrospect, why I think it proved to be that way. You know, we had the Cold War for a long time thereafter, and everybody will look at us and say, blame us. You say, you dropped the bomb, and therefore you inaugurated the atomic age. That's a lot baloney. The atomic age was born the day they split the atom in Europe and everything of that type, not when we dropped the first bomb. And then you won, you had the war and everything else. So the war went on for 4 years, and we came very close to losing it. A lot of people don't realize how close we came to losing it. Hitler kept most of his scientists at home, and instead of letting him get out and come to this country and work on our atomic bomb, while they'd had the atomic bomb instead of us. And that's for one reason. They'd had a lot of other firsts that he came out with too, and everything of that type. But it was close. A lot closer than a lot of people will think about today. And then the Japanese, of course, I don't know why they ever started a war. They should not have started a war, because the minute we knocked their Navy out, why they were done.